KBVR FM is supported in part by Corvallis Parks and Recreation, who will be presenting the musical Next to Normal at the Majestic Theater on November 1st through November 17th. More information is available at majestic.org. Support for KBVR comes from First Alternative Co-op. First Alternative has been providing the community with local organic groceries for 50 years. More information can be found on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter with hashtag FirstAltCoop.
Welcome into the Beaver Sports Radio Show here on KBVR on this beautiful Wednesday afternoon. My name is Mitchell Monge. I'm joined here by Soren Carr. Soren, how you doing this afternoon?
Doing great. Beautiful day in Corvallis. Best town in the Pac-12, you know.
Best college town in the Pac-12. Yeah. Renowned for that. Anyways, coming up today, we've got a guest coming on at about 5:15. Sammy Mora, who's the assistant sports editor for the Utah Chronicle. She'll be coming on to preview Utah and Oregon State. Coming up this Saturday, Soren, you and I are going to be on the call. How excited are you for your first game?
Oh, it's going to be fun. Second game, by the way, though.
Oh, this will be your second game. Yeah. All right. That's right. You did have the Cal Poly game. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started really quickly. Here we go. Soren, give us a quick breakdown of what you got from OSU Athletics coming up and from this past week.
So we got some Beavers in the top 25 national rankings and some sports. We're going to start it off with the women's cross-country team. Shout out, number 25 in the country. Big deal, especially with Oregon down the road, dominating in that sport. It's nice to have the women up there. Women's golf, number 15, after winning in Pullman, Washington a couple weeks ago. Ellie Slama, number 52 golfer in the country. Pretty impressive stuff there. Women's basketball, of course. What we're all excited here for, despite baseball, is they're coming in at number 6 in the country. Pretty cool. We can expect a lot from Destiny Slocum and the rest of the crew there. Baseball is as well coming in at number 6 per the D1Baseball.com overall state rules and rankings. Men's golf, number 28, just outside the top 25 after a win in the Hamptons, New York. Crazy good stuff from them, too. Golf is big here in Corvallis. Women's soccer receiving some votes from the top 25 inclusion here after that impressive 8-0 start. They simmered down a bit, but they've also lost to some impressive nationally ranked schools. Now we've got some international honors here. The impressive gymnast program that we have here in Corvallis. Gymnast Jade Carey from Phoenix, Arizona, an incoming recruit, finished second in the vault at this week's World Team Championships. She will compete in the individuals finals Friday in Stuttgart, Germany, home of Porsche. Ooh. National honors. Quarterback Jake Luton, of course, you've all been hearing about him, received the national recognition after his performance at UCLA at the Rose Bowl by several organizations, including the Mayo Clinic and Capital One for his return to playing after a serious injury 2 years ago. He's officially been added to the Maxwell Watch List Award. Impressive stuff. We'll be getting into that later, Mitchell and I. Sophomore Bridget Skiba from Portland, Oregon, was named top drawer in the Soccer's National Player of the Week after a performance at Utah and Colorado. She recorded 7 saves on the weekend and played a crucial role late in both games to help clinch a 1-0-1 weekend road trip, including an upsetting win in Boulder of the number 17 Buffalo.
I got a quick question for you, so I'm sorry to interrupt, but Bridget Skiba, did you see who she got shouted out by on Twitter?
No.
Hope Solo.
Hope Solo.
After that incredible save, I mean, Skiba just came over the top. First hand goes up. I mean, just a beautiful save, top center of the goal, and Hope Solo just hit her on Twitter with the wow, great job, and she came back and was like, oh, wow, that's like such an incredible thing coming from somebody you look up to like that. But I just thought that was really cool. And I mean, women's soccer continuing to make some big splash.
One of the more popular sports. I mean, it's huge. Thank goodness they won that World Cup. Impressive stuff this summer. Unbelievable. Basketball woman, getting into more of it. Team USA will play an exhibition game at Gill Coliseum with Scott Ruick's team November 4th. It's one of 4 games Team USA will play against NCAA teams. And Oregon State, in the impressive Pac-12 conference for women's basketball, was picked 3rd in the preseason poll, with, of course, the Oregon Ducks rounding out at number 1 in the country with Sabrina Ionescu. Golf men, as mentioned, recently came off a winning finish in the Hamptons Intercollegiate in New York, in the Hamptons, with Sean Liu from Honolulu winning his first career title after back-to-back wins by Spencer Tibbetts. Golf is on fire. So rounding out, we got the men's soccer, which earned a tie with number 2 Stanford. Huge tie there. In a road match on Sunday, Beavers are undefeated against Stanford in the last 3 meetings with the Cardinal, and pretty sure they've won 2 national championships in the last 5 years or so.
Really?
They're ridiculous. I mean, that's really impressive, actually. Team is 5-4-1, and they're headed to Seattle this week for a matchup with Washington at 3 p.m. You can catch that on the Pac-12 network. Now with women's soccer, of course, as mentioned, after that 8-0 start, they lost one and tied one, but they won again, and they returned home to Lorenz Field for a Pac-12 matchup against the number 2 Stanford Cardinals. So both in men's and women's. Stanford, as usual, typical sport for them to be good in. Brainiacs down there.
A lot of good student athletes in that school.
Yeah, I'd say just I mean, whatever. Stanford, you guys are good at some stuff. We got baseball and engineering. Sophomore, Bridget Skiba, as mentioned, is currently ranked in the Pac-12 in following categories. Second in save percentage at 80%. That's ridiculous. Third in goals against average, 62%. Fifth in saves, 29 total. And tied for 6th in goals allowed, 7. That's like throwing a pick there. That's some Jake Luton stats over here, barely holding those off. Impressive stuff. Now the volleyball team, of course, with that win against Oregon a couple weeks ago here in Corvallis, they take their 8-7 record on the road this week to number 11 Washington on Friday at 7 p.m. And following that, they go up to Pullman and a number 24 ranked Cougars there on Sunday at noon. The Pac-12, never-ending top 25 rankings here. And of course, we're rounding up to get to football. The Beavers with that impressive 48-31 win at the Rose Bowl.
Right.
Jake Luton, of course. Isaiah Hodgins, the top-rated receiver in the country by Pro Football Focus. We talked about this some last week. He leads the Pac-12 and 5th in the nation for receiving yards with 632, 4 players only in front of him, one of them in the FCS from Missouri State, I believe, Arkansas State, excuse me. He ranked 2nd in the nation and leads the Pac-12 for receiving yards per game, receptions per game, and touchdowns receiving. And he's already on the road to possibly surpassing former Beaver Brandon Cooks, of course, who plays for the Los Angeles Rams. He has 16 career touchdown receptions, 7th most in school history. He's the all-time leader with 24 is Brandon Cooks. We can get into more of these details later. What did you think about the game, Mitch?
Well, I mean, first time that they've won in the Rose Bowl in a while. That it's really, been since 2012 since Oregon State beat UCLA. Finally, they get the win, and I mean, you go from a team that 2-3 makes a big difference versus 1-4, and even though it's one win on the schedule, you don't really think that there's a whole lot going into it. But at the same time, for Oregon State, they've got their first conference win of the season, but last conference win for them was the comeback against Colorado. So now to go and not only win another conference game, but to win on the road in the fashion that they did, every time it seemed that Oregon State would jump out to a 17 or a 21-point lead, instantly UCLA would strike back. And of course, UCLA was missing their starting quarterback, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who was out with injury. But I mean, still, for Oregon State to be able to go down into the Rose Bowl in Pasadena against a team that's also struggling in UCLA, I mean, they were able to get it done on the road, and that was important. And now they've got a huge matchup coming up with Utah, which, again, as we mentioned earlier.
15.
Right, 15.
Top 25 match.
15th ranked Utah. And we'll, again, here coming up in about 5-7 minutes or so, we'll have Sammy Mora, who's the assistant sports editor for the Utah Chronicle, the on-campus paper for the University of Utah. She'll be joining us here live on the Beaver Sports Radio Show to discuss Utah and Oregon State coming up. Before we get to her, Soren, what do we got? What are your thoughts going into this game?
Utah's defense is solid.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing else to say about that. The one thing that I'm interested for the Beavers is the fact that they've been able to move the ball so effectively lately. Not that they're playing really impressive defenses, but Utah's offense hasn't been anything special from what we've seen this season. We'll go into more detail about that later, but they beat a Washington State team soundly in their last game after a bye week up in Wazoo. Of course, Mike Leach dumped on his team after that game. I think we all heard about that one. But there's something about the Beavers right now that's kind of making me want to pick them in this game. But at the same time, we've got to stick to reality. We've got to stick one game at a time. We've got to be conservative in a way when watching these games. But
so I guess the way to put it would be to say that the Beavers aren't absolutely out of this game entirely, especially after what they showed. But even with, the flashes of the offense and you say the defense's improvements and cutting, I think 15 points a game off their scoring average from last year in points allowed. I mean, this Oregon State team has shown a lot of improvements in different areas. And now for
the most improved team statistically in the country in September.
Of course, that wasn't a lot coming from where they set the bar at last year.
Yeah, fair.
Anyways, Isaiah Hodgins again over UCLA last week. 3 touchdowns, a career high for him. Go ahead and give you guys a quick little preview on Utah. Utah coming in led by dual threat quarterback Tyler Huntley. Dealt with injuries a little bit this year, but really that additional dynamic of him being able to run the ball makes him one of those really tough guys, because not only is he capable of running the ball, but he's also a sharp passer, patient, waits for his routes. And Utah with no interceptions on the year. So, Tyler Huntley, he's making safe throws, and he's a really smart, cerebral quarterback. And then for Utah, they get probably one of the biggest keys to their offense back this week. Zach Moss, big bruising running back, downhill runner. He's doing
a beast.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Zach Moss, and of course he's in the game that USC, again, Utah coming into the game at 4-1 off a bye week last week. Against USC, their only loss of the year, which was a Friday night game. Zach Moss didn't play very much. He took limited snaps, went out with injury, missed the next 3 weeks, I believe. But for Oregon State, they're going to have to not only be able to run stop, they're also going to have to pass stop. I mean, this team is very, very balanced on offense. And, of course, you mentioned it, the defense. I mean, we'll get to it a little bit later when Sammy joins us, but 53.8 rush yards allowed per game. Coming into an Oregon State team whose bread and butter has been running the ball offensively.
Kyle Whittingham there.
Exactly, Kyle Whittingham.
NFL team.
Yep, 15th year for Kyle Whittingham and his head coaching.
Consistency.
With Utah, exactly. So the Utes, again, as we mentioned it, they're 15th overall in the country, coming in at 4-1. Only loss in the conference was to USC. Again, seems like every team is beating each other in the Pac-12. Pretty even conference. So, again, Utah 4-1 on the year, coming into this game after a bye week. Before that, they beat Washington State 38-13 on September 28th. Last time these two teams played in 2016, Utah won 19-14 here in Reser Stadium. And so this is the first matchup for these two teams since 2016. So Oregon State leading the all-time series 5-3-1 here in Corvallis. And again, coming up right after the break, we're going to have Sammy Mora, the assistant sports editor for the Utah Chronicle, coming on. Stay tuned to the Beaver Sports Radio Show, 5:14 after the hour. You're listening to KBVR Corvallis.
Hey Beavers, let's talk about sleep. Did you know 2/3 of students experience extreme drowsiness in class, and that poor sleep habits can negatively impact your GPA? It's recommended to get between 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep each night. Blue light emitted from electronic devices hinders the production of melatonin, the hormone that readies you for sleep. If you have trouble falling asleep, try turning off screens at least 1 hour before going to bed, avoiding caffeine before 2 p.m., and maintaining a regular sleep schedule. CAPS wishes you a better sleep tonight.
At Beavers Digest, our publication is divided into 3 sections: Create, Experience, and #GoBeavs. In Create, the focus is on building a creative and healthy lifestyle. The Experience section is where BD highlights key student figures in hopes to elevate their voices in the greater Corvallis community. The 3rd section, #GoBeavs, is where we seek to cover anything OSU sports or spirit related. You can check out our latest issue on stands around campus now.
In this political climate, it's more important than ever to know who carries your voice in government. Oregon Senators are Ron Wyden and Jeff Merkley, and the 4th District's Peter DeFazio represents the area around the OSU campus and House of Representatives. To make your voice heard, you can find emails and phone numbers for your congresspeople at senate.gov and house.gov. To go beyond the headlines and sound bites to get a better sense of how complex political issues affect us here at home, you can listen to Orange Media Network's Perspectives podcast with me, Joe Wolf. Perspectives is available on iTunes and Google Play. Just search Orange Media Network Perspectives and subscribe.
At Beavers Digest, our publication is divided into 3 sections: Create, Experience, and hashtag Go Beavs. In Create, the focus is on building a creative and healthy lifestyle. The Experience section is where BD highlights key student figures in hopes to elevate their voices in the greater Corvallis community. The 3rd section, hashtag Go Beavs, is where we seek to cover anything OSU sports or spirit related. You can check out our latest issue on stands around campus now. Do you want to keep up with everything from KBVR FM? On our Twitter at KBVR_FM, you can talk with your favorite DJ, stay up on the latest from our music blog, and let us know what you've been listening to. We care about what you have to say here at your college station, 88.7 FM, KBVR, Corvallis.
Welcome back in live to the Beaver Sports Radio Show. We got here live with us the assistant sports editor for the Utah Chronicle, Sammy Mora, joining us here on the show. Sammy, how's it going today?
I'm good. How are you guys? Thanks for having me.
Hey, we're doing great. Thank you for joining us. And
Thanks
again,
for coming in, yeah.
So, again, Mitchell Monge here, Soren, Carr, my partner, and on the line we have Sammy Mora, who works out for the Utah Chronicle. Sammy, the last time these two teams played, it was here in Corvallis in 2016, and Utah defeated Oregon State 19-14. It was kind of a bruising game, rainy, terrible weather. Obviously, it should be better for this weekend, but only 5 teams. This is 2 teams that are completely different, and Utah coming in at 4-1. What have you seen that's been so impressive from Utah this year?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing is Tyler Huntley's play this season. He has played lights out. Hasn't even thrown an interception this season. He's been making very smart decisions with the football. He's been finding his wide receivers. He's known when to tuck it and run and when to slide, when to throw it out of bounds, and it's just really, really good to see.
So you mentioned it, Tyler Huntley, kind of a dual threat quarterback. I personally haven't seen many of Utah's games this year except for the loss to USC, ironically. What have other teams been able to do to take away the run from Tyler Huntley? Because not only is he a dynamic passer, you mentioned it, no interceptions, but he's also got wheels too.
Yeah, there hasn't been that much success of stopping him because Utah has a very 3-headed offense. You have Tyler Huntley on one head as a runner and as a quarterback, and then you have the run game, which consists of Zach Moss and then his backup, which have all been playing fantastic, and then you have the wide receiving core. So I think that you can't really stop one because you're going to have to figure out a way to stop all 3 at the same time.
Right, and you mentioned...
sorry, go.
I was just going to say, you mentioned Zach Moss. He's going to be returning to action this week after injury. What do you expect from him? Is he fully healthy, or is... obviously with the bye week that helps, but what's your take on the Zach Moss situation?
So he's been said that he is good to go for Saturday, so I'm hoping to see him break the all-time school rushing record this weekend. He is only, I think, under 200 yards away from doing that, and
Wow.
He is a freight train. It takes 2 or 3 guys consistently to take him down on a tackle. You can't just arm tackle this man. You need to do full body 3 or 4 guys. So.
Interesting. Today at practice, defensive coordinator Tim Tibesar mentioned it today. He goes, Zach Moss is a really strong downhill running power back. He even said it. He goes, we're going to need to get as many hats to the football as we can to bring this guy down. He's obviously very dynamic runner. But on the other end for Oregon State, they've got Jamar Jefferson and Artavis Pierce, who are both averaging 90-plus rush yards per game. They're going up against this Utah defense that's only allowed 53.8 yards per game total in terms of the offense. Do you see Oregon State having more success / is there a team that they have played that's been this good on the ground?
It's kind of hard to say because Utah at this point hasn't played a lot of rush-heavy teams with the exception of BYU.
Okay.
But they were able to shut Tyson Williams down. Our front line of Lex Fotu, Bradley and I, John Tennessini, those guys are all next level guys. They can stop that run. Plus, if our linebackers shoot up, there's not getting anything through there.
Utah was the preseason media choice to win the Pac-12 conference this season. Currently, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, they're in a three-way tie for first in the Pac-12 South. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I think that's correct.
With
Yeah.
Arizona State, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one other thing that really stands out to me about Utah, and my partner Soren here mentioned it a little bit earlier in the show, but Kyle Whittingham in his 15th season, he's got that stability at Oregon State. For the Beavers, they have Jonathan Smith, who's in their second season. I want to know, from your perspective, what have you seen? Obviously, you probably haven't, kept up for 15 years straight, but what is Kyle Whittingham being that head coach for 10 plus years? What does that bring to the team, year in and year out, that level of consistency?
Yeah, I think consistency is the biggest thing, and Utah is known for their all-star defenses. They have numerous guys every single year who go into the NFL who play on that defense. And I think the last couple of years, it's been not so much a defensive team as well as our offense has really stepped up too, to be able to be an all-around team. And I just think Kyle brings the consistency. He brings the passion. He cares about his guys. It's a family. It's a giant family up here on campus. So I think that he's just really good at bringing everyone together.
Again, if you're just joining us, we have on the line here Sammy Mora, the assistant sports editor for the Utah Chronicle out at the University of Utah. And Sammy, one other thing I wanted to ask you about, the second half ability of Utah. They're outscoring teams 72-22 in the second half, just absolutely dominant. They only have 20 defensive points allowed. The other two were on a safety against USC. What enables this team to be so good in the second half? Is that an attribute to coaching? Is that lack of performance in the first half? Is this what we should be seeing for 4 quarters? What's your take on that?
Well, I think that it's a mixture of quite a few things. Utah in the past has been known to kind of start out as like a slower team and mainly a second half team.
Uh-huh.
But I think that this season they've gotten a lot better at like starting not as slow. But both our coordinators, Andy Ludwig and Morgan Scally, have done fantastic halftime adjustments every single game. Like, there's been small things that they have changed on the defensive side, small things they've changed on the offensive side that have made it a lot easier and better for the team to score on in the second half.
Right on. So another thing, Utah ranks 5th in the NCAA and 1st in the Pac-12 in time of possession, dominating other teams, averaging 35.5 points, or rather 35.5 minutes per game out of the total 60. Just given off this, what would you say the keys are for Utah to come in and, win the game against, a UCLA team, or rather an OSU team that's coming off a pretty big win for the program, haven't had a lot of success on the road. Now you come back home after a big win. Is this something you could see Utah taking Oregon State lightly here, especially coming off a bye?
No. Kyle does a really good job at telling the team that their goal is to go 1-0 every single week and to not take any opponent lightly. And I think it's very evident that sometimes that message doesn't go through if you look at the first half, even the first 3 quarters of the Utah-BYU game last year. It was BYU's game the entire way through until that 4th quarter because the team was looking forward to that Pac-12 championship game the next week against Washington. So I think that they need to stay in that mentality of 1-0. Like, it was that game against UCLA was a shootout on both sides, and I think that Utah knows now that they can do this. So I think that they just need to play just the 1-0 mentality that they've been playing every week this season.
Right on. So for if you're from looking at this from the Oregon State perspective, what does Oregon State have to do to be able to upset this 15th ranked Utah team?
I think they need to be smart with the ball. Utah has quite a few players on the defensive end of the ball that can cause turnovers. Francis Bernard, one of our linebackers, already has 2 interceptions this season, one of which that was run back for a touchdown. Jalen Johnson is a ball hawk. Same with Julian Blackman. they need to make sure they're keeping that ball safe, or else it's not even going to be a game. If the Utah defense can keep taking that ball away, Oregon State's going to struggle.
Right on. Thank you so much, Sammy, for joining us again here. Any other last second thoughts you'd like to add, or quick promotion maybe for the Utah Chronicle?
Yeah, so if you guys want to follow up coverage of the game from Utah's perspective, hit me up on Twitter at @S_Mora99. You can follow us on Twitter at The Chronicle, or also look at our content online at thedailyutahchronicle.com.
Awesome, Sammy. Well, you have a great rest of your evening, and thank you so much for joining us here on the Beaver Sports Radio Show.
Sweet. Thank you so much for having me.
Again, that was Sammy Mora, the assistant sports editor for the Utah Chronicle, here live on KBVR. Soren, what are your initial thoughts and reactions? Because you mentioned it earlier that this is a very winnable game for Oregon State. But that one stat that really sticks out to me is Utah's ability to dominate the time of possession. And it starts to scare me a little bit when I start to think of how up-tempo Oregon State's offense has been, and that's when it's been most effective. But can Oregon State keep that Utah defense on the field?
For a team that dealt with it a couple weeks ago in Stanford, and Stanford's pro-style offense and David Shaw's ability to hold the ball consistently, take time off that clock, Kyle Whittingham is known for that, as well as David Shaw. We saw success with it. Granted, Stanford's not the same team we've seen in the past, where they're constantly running the ball down your throat, and it was a different game of sorts with the rain. I do think the Beavers have an ability to play their own game for the first time in some seasons, even if they don't have a tremendous amount of speed, comparably to programs such as Oregon and Oklahoma State, which they lost to soundly, as we know. I think that the fact that Oregon State has such a balanced attack on the offensive side will give them the ability to maintain possession against them. And their defense, that's just going to see, it's a week-by-week process, I really think. I think that we've seen bright spots and we've seen down spots, but the fact that they had success against a team similar to Utah on their offense, that it'll be an unpredictable game on the defensive side, but it'll be interesting as well.
So here's Utah's schedule right now. First game was at BYU. That was close in the first half, and then Utah kind of ran away with it in the second. But so win over BYU. Then you have Northern Illinois at home, another sound win.
BYU's not bad either.
No,
they got a bad rep early, but they lost a tough one at Tennessee.
Right.
Also SEC program. Go on.
So after BYU, Northern Illinois, Idaho State, loss at USC, win over Washington State. From somebody, if I'm looking at this purely from an outsider's perspective, I don't see a quality win on that schedule.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I've been looking at Utah, wondering what this hype is about all season, including the preseason. I understand that they're consistent every year. I understand that their defense is legitimate and solid from what we know and what they've been hyped up to be. But you hear all these analysts talking about them as the potential winner of the Pac-12. I don't know how they'd have a chance to beat Oregon, let alone Washington, even if Washington's not as good as we expected.
Right. So I think one of the biggest keys for Utah has been the defense. Like we said, obviously forcing the turnovers, holding teams to very low, scoring averages.
And they're not scoring that much themselves either.
Right. The only thing that, and we were talking about it a little bit, but that time of possession, that's what Utah does so well, is not only is their defense great, they're not going to allow you to score, but the offense is also good enough that when they maintain possession and they are moving the chains, getting first downs and keeping the clock running, especially with Tyler Huntley, using his wheels to escape the pocket, as well as Zach Moss, sometimes Utah's defense gets the added benefit of their offense being able to chew the clock, and I'm sure that's part of Kyle Whittingham's plan.
I'm sure. Utah's one of those teams that you kind of think about and watch. They're not a huge program in the sense on the market or anything that we hear about them all the time, but we always know they're kind of there. Like, they're hovering around the 8-4 mark, making a bowl game, usually in the top 25. But the fact that we aren't seeing them all the time and I'm not watching them and paying attention as much as I would, let's say USC, who they lost to, you mentioned that's the only game you watched of them this season. They get overlooked in a way. So my presumptions to this may be overlooked in this game, and we can find an actual conclusion to that. But we'll see.
So again, Utah and Oregon State set for kickoff at 5 o'clock Pacific, 6 Mountain this Saturday here from Research Stadium. It'll be myself, Mitchell Monge, and my partner here, Soren Carr, with the call live on KBVR. Of course, we'll have the pregame show coming up just before kickoff, slightly before 5 o'clock. Go ahead and tune on in for that broadcast if you got time. How about Isaiah Hodgins and Jake Luton? I mean, that connection, and again, I want to go back kind of when we got Sammy in here, we were able to preview the Utah game. I kind of want to go backtrack a little and maybe not evaluate, but just talk about what went right for Oregon State against UCLA, because this was the first time in, I want to say, since Jonathan Smith has joined as the head coach, that Oregon State has played a full 4-quarter game.
There a little bit. I see what you mean. Yeah,
because it's always been Oregon State is, they'll come out really hot. Yeah. And they're, blazing it up in the first half, and then all of a sudden their offense goes ice cold. The defense either continues at the rate that they were giving up yards or it gets worse, but it seems like they always find a way to lose. They like to beat themselves, or at least that's how it's been for several games that come to recent memory. Of course, one of them, the Hawaii game, or even from earlier this year, that was a game Oregon State should have won going down. They beat themselves at the end of it. Of course, some people are going to say, the refs weren't helping them, but you got to be able to beat the refs as well. So if the good teams don't let that affect them, like good teams don't beat themselves. That's what Utah does. That's why Utah is a perennial powerhouse in the Pac-12 year in and year out, not only with the consistency of Kyle Whittingham, but Utah makes very few mistakes, limited turnovers. On the other hand, Oregon State's now getting into that kind of a rhythm with their offense. One turnover, it was Tristan Gebbia's interception on a tipped pass against Cal Poly. Jake Luton leading the tied for first in the NCAA and, touchdown to interception ratio of 14-0. And then you mentioned it earlier, Pac-12 Offensive Player of the Week, College Football Performance Awards National Player of the Week, and is on the Manning Stars was one of 8 Manning Stars of the Week, and then he was named to the Davey O'Brien's Award Great B list. Luton accounted for 6 touchdowns, including his 19-yard score on the rushing touchdown. But that's the first time, and correct me if I'm wrong, there might have been another time, but that Jake Luton has looked like that, except for the only one I can think of is the second half of the Colorado game, but still that wasn't 4 quarters strung together.
I couldn't agree more. The fact that watching Luton sometimes in games in the pocket, he seems like he gets a little lazy, in a sense, not to talk down on him, but the fact that you see him not step into his passes as much, and maybe it's because he was getting hyped up after that 21-0 start, but he had a continuous amount of energy. You could see his chest bumping out there, and there was a lot of energy. But to add on to something you mentioned earlier about how the Utes are so consistent in Utah, the Beavers and how they've consistently almost been losing games. Like they start hot like the Packers do in the NFL, and they almost blow it. But so the thing with the Beavers this year is they've done that, but they also have gone in reverse. It's almost like they're a team that can compete week in and week out. And we're seeing this because Stanford, we were down 21-3, was it? Or 21-0? 21-0 at a point. Came back to that game. We had a hot start against Oklahoma State, had a hot start against Hawaii, ended up blowing those. But those are polar opposites in a sense, and we didn't really get to see that in the past, seeing that we came back as much. And it's nice to see that we have a variety coming out on the end.
So one of the ways I was thinking about it, and right now, and really as you were saying that, if you take the first half against Hawaii and the second half against Stanford, and they play like that for 4 quarters, Oregon State is one tough team to beat. It's hard for me to look back and say, oh, they could be 4-1 right now. You can always speculate, but there's one thing that is fact, and that is that this team is much better than last year's team. ESPN's SP Plus rating, Beavers were up 15.9 adjusted points per game from their 2018 mark. So that alone, 16 points per game is a huge difference. You think about that. I believe if Oregon State, I believe it's an 8-point swing they would be 4-1. So it's just telling you that the Beavers are in all these games, which is why you can't count them out against Utah. And that's...
Can't count out anyone in the Pac-12 for that matter.
Exactly. You can't even write off UCLA because they came back against Wazoo in that game. That's signature Pac-12 after dark right there.
I still believe Washington State's a good team too.
Oh, yeah. Well, of course, we can get to it in a little bit, but Washington State, their defensive coordinator stepped down recently, you mentioned it, Mike Leach's comments about his players being fat, dumb, and happy and entitled. So a lot of stuff going on in Wazoo, but we're going to go ahead and take another break. When we get back, we'll talk a little bit more about the Utah game and break down talk about the keys to the game for the Utah game against Oregon State this weekend, and then we'll talk about the rest of the football going on in the Pac-12. Again, the time is 5:37. You're listening to KBVR Corvallis.
As part of the federal law called the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, all children with special needs have a right to special education. The disability conditions could include physical impairments, chronic illnesses, intellectual disabilities, hearing and vision difficulties, speech or language impairments, emotional impairments, or learning disabilities. If you know a child who may have a disability, contact your school. If the child is 5 years or younger and you live in either Lynn or Benton County, contact the Lynn and Benton County Early Intervention Program at 541-753-1202 using extension 106. And if you live in Lincoln County, contact the Lincoln County Early Intervention Program at 541-574-2240 using extension 109.
It's that time of year again. OSU PC's 9th annual Battle of the DJs returns this year, but finds a new home with Homecoming. On October 11th from 8 to 11 p.m. in the SEC Plaza, Oregon State student DJs go head-to-head live on stage at Battle of the DJs 2019 to celebrate the end of Week 2. This concert is free to all. Go Beavs!
And we're back with OSU's Fashion Talk, brought to you by Damn Chic Magazine.
Talk to me about this, Taylor.
Well, first we have Sharon straight into class in some gray classic sweatpants, wide frame glasses, and of course we cannot forget that coffee in hand.
I love the look. Is that Aaron? He's totally sporting basketball shorts and slides.
That is Aaron, and look at him go. What a classic and comfy pair.
Whether you wear sweatpants or trousers to class, Damn Chic has a place for you.
And if you want to stay up to date with all things style, follow us on your favorite social media handle at Damn Chic Magazine.
Stay chic.
Do you want to keep up with everything from KBVR FM? On our Twitter at KBVR_FM, you can talk with your favorite DJ, stay up on the latest from our music blog, and let us know what you've been listening to. We care about what you have to say here at your college station, 88.7 FM, KBVR, Corvallis.
Back here live on the Beaver Sports Radio Show on KBVR. The time is 5:39. Mitchell Monge and Soren Carr previewing Utah and Oregon State. They play at 5 o'clock Pacific time this weekend. Again, we'll have the call here on KBVR. Make sure you tune in 88.7 on your radio dials, or you can go online and Google KBVR. Or go to kbvr.com/listen, kbvr.com/listen. Again, Utah and OSU this Saturday, 5 o'clock kickoff. We're going to go ahead and take a step back here and look at last week for the Beavers, doing this little reverse to the Utah preview and now going back to UCLA. But for UCLA, that was, again, we mentioned it earlier, but one of the more impressive wins for Oregon State, and the fact that they were able to string four consecutive quarters of good, solid football together. And there's really three players on offense who want to highlight, and I'll let you go ahead and kind of hit this run in, Soren. But Jake Luton, career day. Isaiah Hodgins, spectacular as always. And then the dark horse of the Oregon State offense, Artavis Pierce.
Artavis Pierce, man, he's a beast.
Oh, yeah. And you've still got Jamar Jefferson right there. But I got a little interesting story for you before I let you dive on into this.
Yeah.
I was talking to one of my buddies who's the managing editor at a subscription website for Oregon State athletics, primarily football. And when Jefferson got hurt in the Hawaii game, I mean, you can choose whether to believe me or not, but I'll tell you right now, it's true. I told him, I said, I think that Oregon needs to start Artavis Pierce at running back, and that's no knock on Jamar Jefferson. It just seems that when they gave him those 31 carries, not that he was gassed per se.
You felt this after he was injured, or
yeah, after when he was coming back, and I saw him on the field at the Cal Poly game. I was like, he doesn't look healthy. Why do they have him in here?
Yeah.
And I wanted to see more Artavis Pierce because he's proven he never really lost his starting job. He got hurt last year, and if you wanted to allude it to something that's way crazier than this, I mean, it's like a Drew Bledsoe, Tom Brady situation. You got a guy who's really good at his position, Artavis Pierce, had a huge game against Ohio State, Artavis Pierce, and then gets hurt, a la Drew Bledsoe, and your backup comes in, and it's this true freshman, 3-star guy from Narbonne, California. And nobody really knows about this kid. I mean, of course, I didn't really. I knew he was on the roster, but I didn't really know much about him. And then he goes ahead and breaks out, and Pac-12, All-American freshman.
In Oregon State history.
Exactly,
Yeah.
But rushes for almost 1,000 yards, if not more. But either way, Artavis Pierce was still mixed into the offense. But for me, I feel like Oregon State has shown, especially this season, of course, granted, Jamar hasn't been healthy all year, but Oregon State seems like they're a more proficient offense with Artavis Pierce in the backfield. What do you think about that?
I see what you're saying, and at the same time, it's funny because if you look at stats, especially comparably to UCLA, time of possession, something we talked about in detail, UCLA held the ball 35 minutes, 17 seconds. Oregon State, 24-43. That's a significant difference there. And UCLA beat us out in overall yards, rushing, 256, 163, 492 to 448 overall. Only thing we beat them in was passing, but Luton was superb. But I feel like the balance and just the chemistry right now, there's something different. And it's tough in football compared to other sports such as basketball and soccer. You kind of feed off your teammates. But other than Luton and Hodgins, because they have a chemistry that's special, you see it maybe with Artavis Pierce. He could be in the backfield. He could be cheering on his teammates in a different way. I mean, there might be some different atmosphere. He's setting off something differently with the team, like his aura, or I don't know what it is, but there's this balance in the offense that you haven't really seen from them, of course, in the past couple of years, but in a long time. And Artavis Pierce may be one of the differences with this right now.
So for me, the biggest difference you get between Artavis Pierce and Jamar Jefferson is pass blocking.
Yeah.
Artavis Pierce is a senior. AP knows how to pass block. And in talking to Jamar, he goes, yeah, hey, AP's been here. He's worked in the system.
Catch.
Yeah, that too as well. But when talking to Jamar, he goes, yeah, AP's worked with me, and this was in fall camp. He goes, yeah, worked on me with the pass blocking. Of course, I still think, there's a lot to learn, but Artavis Pierce is really good in pass protection. And the other thing that I believe that is attributing to the Beavers' success this year is they like to run a lot of the 11 sets, so 2 tight ends, 1 on each side, so Tongiai and Tegan Catoriano. They leave Tegan Catoriano into pass block a lot, so they're going 5 linemen, a tight end, and even the running back on a check and release potential. You got 7 guys picking up pass rushers at the line of scrimmage. Of course, granted, they'll spread it out and throw the ball around more, but that added pass protection, the benefit that's probably, for me at least, one of the primary benefits that I see with Artavis Pierce. So, again, Jamar Jefferson expected to be back to full health for the Utah game this weekend.
Dangerous duo there.
Exactly. So, I guess if you're, say, Brian Lindgren in this position, you got to ride the hot running back, right? You have to let AP go.
Well, he holds a school record right now for rushing yards per attempt.
Number 1 in the Pac-12.
Yeah. He's being looked at by NFL scouts right now. As a legitimate, possible undrafted guy, maybe walking on a team.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's got the speed to go compete with anybody. And one of the most memorable things was, for me, watching AP, I believe, probably my favorite play I've seen him run was against Ohio State last year. Season opener, takes a handoff, second half goes, I believe it was 83 yards.
I know what you're talking about.
And he just put on the burners. And everybody, after the game, they're like, hey, did you guys know that he was this fast? And some of the players and coaches were like, hey, yeah, we knew he was fast, but maybe not that fast.
Well, as Oregon State fans, you didn't even think you had the athletes watching that game compared to Ohio State. You watch him make a play like that, you're like, oh my goodness, we got someone here.
And they had the last week's NFL Defensive Player of the Week from my very own San Francisco 49ers, Nick Bosa.
Oh my goodness.
Tearing it up, wreaking havoc on Luton, knocked him out of the game with a concussion there at the start. That was no good, but anyways, bad memories for Oregon State fans. But regardless, so last week against UCLA, you come out of the Rose Bowl. Now it's on to Utah. I'm going to ask you, Soren, what are your 3, if you had to pick 3, important keys to this game for Oregon State? You can choose, offense, defense, a player, a specific aspect of the game, coaching. 3 things that you think Oregon State needs to do if they want to beat this Utah team, and then I'll give you mine after.
Number one, I've got to think right in the hot hands in a way. I mean, hot players in this situation. Artavis Pierce, as you mentioned, starting him's a great idea. Giving him the ball early along with Hodgins is great. Balance the attack between the two of them. So maybe they can focus on one for the game and maybe feed it off on the other. One of them starts hot. Of course, that'll feed too in confidence. On the defensive side, get Hamilcar Rashed Jr. started early. He's the Pac-12 leader, 8th in the country for tackles for a loss and tied for 6th in the country with sacks. He's a beast. He gets involved early. He's going to pump up the rest of the defense like he has in the past. And with Luton, he's just got to get a feel out there. I feel like he just is starting to get his confidence for the first time since he's been at Oregon State. He's starting to play well, getting a feel for all of it. Another thing for the Beavers is they have to play smart. I understand that Jonathan Smith has some interesting play calls after being under Peterson at UW, which I really like some of them. However, in week 1, we saw some odd decisions. And against a team like Utah, it's almost like shooting yourself in the foot in these situations. You really don't want to give them any more leadway than they already have, being a top 15 team coming over here. And from most people's perspectives, we're supposed to get blown out. If we play a smart game, granted, I could be totally wrong and the aggressive plays could be the difference maker, because oftentimes the only way for a weaker opponent to win is through trick plays. I don't believe we're that much of a weaker opponent. I think we can win this game. And the other thing is turn the ball over. They won't pass as much as we can, but just making sure that we can watch the run. And when they do pass defensively, we just need to keep our eyes open.
So to reiterate, your 3 keys, Soren's 3 keys to the game are ride the hot players, namely Isaiah Hodgins and Artavis Pierce, forcing turnovers on defense, and then not getting too fancy with the play calls, keeping it simple, run, pass, none of the Daniel Rodriguez 4th and 15 fake punt while you're got a guy double covered out there.
Their special team, I mean, that's a good way to put it. Special teams wise and defensively, Utah's just so solid. It's tough to make those plays work against them. And if we're going to win this one, I think it's going to be a low-scoring game.
So one other thing I just want to mention really quickly while I'm thinking about it, Jack Coletto, former quarterback turned into linebacker, he's going to go ahead and redshirt the rest of the season. So we won't see any of the wild Coletto packages, none of the short yardage, put Coletto in. Also not going to see him on special teams. He was the primary blocker on the kickoff return. Yeah. So, Jack Coletto going to preserve a year of eligibility. He's going to redshirt the rest of the season. Won't see him the rest of the year. That'll put Nick Moore at the number 3 quarterback, the transfer.
Now let's hear your 3.
Say that again?
Let's hear your 3.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Number 1 is going to be control the ball. Time of possession is going to be huge for Oregon State. So I believe that if the Beavers are able to have the ball for 30 to 35 minutes a game, at least on hopefully the plus side of 30 for their sake, that's my number 1 key. So that's going to mean running the ball early and often, establishing the ground game, keeping the passes, simple, fine finding Isaiah Hodgins on the slants.
You'd have to think they're doubling him a lot this game.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. But on the other hand, for Oregon State, they've got other very capable guys, such as
to your point, exactly.
Yeah, they got Colby Taylor, who's been
Short
dynamic.
slants.
He had the nice catch going up the sideline, 40-something yards against UCLA. Tyjon Lindsey had the 53-yard touchdown on the play action on third down. So it's not like Oregon State's lacking other receivers. I think Luton keys into Hodgins a lot, and I think he knows how good he is, and he knows he can beat him. So that kind of gives him a fail-safe. But in the other sense, you got to get Champ Flemings, Tyjon Lindsey, Colby Taylor, and even Noah Tongiai and Tegan Kitoriano involved. And Kitoriano caught his first career touchdown pass last week. Number 2 is going to be keep Zach Moss under 100 yards on the ground. I think if Oregon State, now I'm not saying total rushing yards because you're going to give up some to Tyler Huntley, and obviously they're going to need to establish contain on the outside with Rashid Jr. and John McCartan. But if you can hold Zach Moss himself to under 100 yards, I think the Beavers should be able to be in prime position to get a win, because that's really the bread and butter for Utah, is establishing the running attack, which opens up their passing attack. If the Beavers can stop the run early and often, then they're going to be able to go ahead and sit back and play the pass in obvious situations. If you can get Utah into 3rd and 10, 3rd and 12, maybe even 3rd and 8, still, 3rd and long to medium long are not easy plays, and Oregon State's defense has had a lot of trouble with that.
Well, the problem with that also is you just show how good of a team they are with Tyler Huntley because of how effective he is not only in passing in the pocket but on the run.
And you'd be afraid
controlling one part,
right? So when you get to like the 3rd and long, and if you lose contain as an outside linebacker, I mean, you can let Huntley scramble for a first down.
Yeah.
And then my last key to the game is going to be for Oregon State to limit force turnovers defensively, because this is a team that, not only have they not turned the ball over, but they also haven't forced a lot of turnovers. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be a combination of, I think, 2 things that are going to be really important to force turnovers. One is going to be pressure on Huntley. You need to get Huntley out of the pocket and moving, even though he's good at throwing on the run. Still, that's going to be one of the biggest things is for the outside linebackers, and especially down even to the defensive ends and defensive tackles to get that initial push on the line, putting pressure on Huntley. And then the second one is obviously going to be the discipline from the secondary to go along with that, because you can have a line that's getting a great amount of push, but then one of your backside corners gets burned on a deep post route, and that's it. I mean, so much for your pressure. So I think the 3 keys are going to be to force turnovers, hold Zach Moss under 100 yards, and limit the ability on 3rd down, especially getting pressure on Tyler Huntley, forcing him to make more decisions, forcing him to throw on the run, and get him out of his comfort zone. Because when Tyler Huntley, Zach Moss get going, those 2 guys are really hard to stop. Obviously, dynamic rushers for the Utah Utes.
Get their defense in a rhythm there, exactly what we don't want to happen. An interesting fact, though, about this game, I'm sure you've heard it, Mitch, though, is that Oregon State and Utah both lead the Pac-12 for 3rd down conversion percentage, each at 53.8%.
Really?
Yeah.
I did not know that, as a matter of fact. That's one of the other things I was thinking was
3rd down conversion. That's huge. Beavers improving that much in that category?
For Oregon State, though, one of their problems is that they like to get into 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, and that's where it's like, oh man, this is starting to become a struggle. You got to get it into 3rd manageable, and that would probably be if I had a 3B on my keys to the game. Limit 3rd down 3B. And 3rd down and 7, 6 plus. 3rd and 5 is even you'd like to be 3rd and 4 or less.
Yeah,
because you want to. If you're operating well as an offense, 3 to 4 rush yards, if you can go first carry, handoff, 3 to 4 yards. Second carry, handoff, 3 to 4 yards. You got AP who's averaging 7.8. I mean, sounds like it could be a lot more than that.
Just give them the ball every play.
Exactly. But at the same time, for Oregon State, they've got to be able to establish an identity on offense. They got to be able to prove that they're a team that last week wasn't a fluke. Because I think still Oregon State, when you say who's the worst teams in terms of football in the Pac-12, you'd say, 11-12, Oregon State, UCLA probably. just in terms of pure record and performance in recent history. So it's going to be a tough challenge for Oregon State this weekend. But again, Utah coming in ranked 15th in the nation, AP poll and coaches poll. 15th, they actually moved up 2 spots on their bye week.
Yeah.
But still, for Oregon State, coming in top 15 opponent in Utah, hosting them in Reser Stadium. And Soren, what are kind of your last thoughts on this before we go ahead and wrap this up today?
I have a feeling Reese's going to be rocking a little more than usual this weekend. I mean, I'm always optimistic about that. But the fact that it's a top 15 team, people are aware of that. We just came off a win in impressive fashion that I feel like wasn't really a guilt win in the sense that analysts and such are just saying, we'll give the Beavers a bump up here in the rankings or something in power rankings in terms of the Pac-12. But they showed legitimate grit and an offensive balance that really, it's going to be tough to see if other teams can hold them off in any way.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to do a new little thing here. Predictions. I'm going to hold you down. I've got it right here. Pen and paper. I'm going to write it down. I want you to give me your prediction for the final score from this weekend.
What's the weather supposed to be like this Saturday?
I want to say
Pretty
it's
nice.
supposed to be, mid 60s, partly cloudy.
Evening game, 62 degrees. It looks like it's going to be really nice around that time.
Oh, yeah. Perfect football weather. Of course, I don't think there's such a thing as bad football weather.
That's very true. You can't have bad weather with football.
All right,
College
so
football season.
So give me your prediction. I want a winner and a score.
I got the Beavers.
Okay.
I got the Beavers 27-24. We're going to have a comeback and shoot in the kicking. It's going to be a game-winning field goal.
Defensive
coming
battle.
down to the wire.
Defensive battle.
Hometown pick. Maybe a bold call here, Cotton, but we'll see how it pans out.
I'm going to go ahead and take the favorite on this. I'm going to take Utah. I'm going to take them 38-24. And I think that the Beavers are going to be able to maintain this game. Get into it early, but I don't think that the Beavers are ever going to be able to stay with Utah. I'm very scared of the rush defense. I think Zach Moss is going to be huge. I think and Sammy mentioned it. I mean, he's only, 177 yards away from breaking the all-time school rushing record out there at the University of Utah. So he's going to be juiced up. This is a Beaver defense that has allowed a lot of rush yards recently. I believe, I want to say 11th in the Pac-12 in rush yards allowed per game, maybe 12th. I'm not sure. But for Oregon State, if they can stop the run, they'll have a chance. But realistically, it's going to be homecoming for Oregon State. That'll provide a little bit more incentive. And one of my favorites, Retro Benny. Second year in a row, Oregon State's breaking out the Retro Benny logo. That'll be on the midfield 50-yard line instead of the normal logo. I believe they're going to have the Retro Benny helmets again. Those were sweet last year. I remember that. Those are
changed the logo to a Instagram page and stuff with
Yep. They've done a lot of social media work with that. And anyway, so wrap up our predictions. Soren's got Oregon State coming out with a win this Saturday, 27-24 over 15th ranked Utah. I'm going to be a little bit more. Exactly. We got an optimist and a realist, and I'm going to be the realist over here, and I'm going to say Utah. Yeah. Utah's going to win it 38-24. Those are my predictions. Anyways, stay tuned. We'll be back here on KBVR next week for the Beaver Sports Radio Show. Same time, same place. KBVR, 5 p.m. for Soren, Carr. And we'd like to really quickly thank you again, Sammy Mora, assistant sports editor out for the Utah Chronicle. Awesome having her on today. A lot of insight into the Utah game. So for Soren, Carr, Mitchell, Monge, you've been listening to the Beaver Sports Radio Show, and tune in next week at 5 o'clock. Rather, first, tune in this Saturday at 5. Oregon State, KBVR. You don't want to miss it. This is going to be a great matchup homecoming. For then, anyways, keep it locked on KBVR Corvallis.